When you become a believer, although you still have trouble in your life, you have peace and a sense of presence which lifts you above the world and keeps you safe. I know my life has been a journey of adventure and excitement and also many trials. The Bible says, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. I was a Muslim. Now I am a Christian. Come join me as I begin this new life.
Here is today's lesson.
Today we're going to be talking about Muslim marriages, what I call the conundrum of Muslim marriages, because I was ignorant for a long time about the variety of Muslim marriages. I'm just thinking like the average American, you're married or you're not married. And then when I found this out, I was very confused. So I think a lot of people in the West should probably know a little more detail on it. Most of what I'm presenting here will be true cases that I've run into over the years and have had to figure out what is going on. In America, you check boxes a lot of times, whether you go to the doctor's office or a census or whatever, they say, are you married or not? Have any of you seen those boxes that you check, married, unmarried? Sometimes they ask divorce if they're a little more intrusive, but usually that just goes under the unmarried category. So that's the way we're thinking, black and white, yes or no. But that's not the way it is with Islam. So let's look at the first thing that you might not know, which is an important factor in Muslim marriages. It is the marriage itself. Is it a sacrament, which is what they say in the Christian faith, or is it a contract, which is what they say in Islam? So the contract is, let's make a deal. Your side and my side, perhaps the woman's side and the man's side, or the father's side. Actually, it sounds pretty good when you first hear about it. And when I first heard about that from one of my Saudi students, and she was saying what she wanted to put in her marriage contract, I thought, you know, there are some benefits in that. There are some things that you would like to establish from the beginning. We don't do that with Christian marriage. Some people might say maybe we should, but I think the way we approach that is perhaps with the prenuptial agreement. But for them, they can put things in the contract. Both sides agree. And one thing I think is good about this for Americans is actually it gives you a good discussion point. It's something you can talk to the Muslim young women and girls about, and even married women. So here's an example of some Muslim marriage contracts, just to give you a little idea of what they look like. A lot of the things are prefabbed, you can get over the internet, or you can make some specifications. There are some challenges with this though. First of all, it sets up expectations, and these might not be possible to be met. It's because a lot of us, like in Christian churches, some of them are finally teaching, don't expect to have all your needs met in marriage. Don't expect to get from anyone or anything what you can only get from God. Many people are approaching marriage hoping that it will fulfill their needs. They'll have their soulmate, their emotional, physical, intellectual needs will all be met. And you might demand that in a marriage contract, or if you're a Christian, you might just be expecting it. Big trouble. So the other thing is, you have these expectations. How do you assure compliance? Not easy. Why? Because the husband still has all these advantages. So quite a few of the young girls tell me, in my marriage contract, it's going to state clearly, I am the only wife. Let's see what the decisions are about that. Can you really take away a man's rights? The other thing about a marriage contract that I think is important to know is that that is such an ingrained concept in people from a Muslim background that even if they become Christians, they take that into their marriage. It's difficult for them to get over the idea that this is what I need in marriage, and you need to fulfill that, and that's a contract, rather than it's a sacrament for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, till death do us part. Before God, we are married. And frankly, I have seen this with almost every Muslim that's been a Christian that I've been close to, has real troubles adjusting to that concept. Now we'll talk about Muslim-Christian marriage. So a Muslim man can marry, as you probably heard, he can marry Christian women. And why is that? Well, they're considered to be at least God-fearing, and if he marries them, they will actually help spread Islam because their children will be declared Muslim. What about the woman? Does she have that right? No. She cannot, because the theory there is she would be under the power of an infidel. But bottom line, it would really not help spread Islam, and it would be taking someone from their tribe into the Christian tribe, so it goes against the tribal mentality. So that is something that's not fair, and not only that, it is forbidden in the Quran. And if she knows, according to the Islamic fatwa regarding women, if she knows that it is against Islam when she did it, she will be punished according to the law. It doesn't specify what that punishment is. Maybe that's up to the family. We don't know for sure. But if the groom does convert to Islam, they say you need to be really careful, because if he leaves Islam, then he must be killed. So, you know, they admit it. In some countries, it's considered actually sort of a panache, sort of a good thing to marry an American guy if he converts to Islam. But still, he's risking his life to do it. Even if he doesn't believe Islam, he needs to fake it really well, or he'll lose his life. People will be watching. Here's a section we're going to talk about some of the vows. I don't know if you knew this. Do you think that in a Muslim marriage you have vows? Well, they have the contract, so they sign the contract. They don't have to take vows. And so one of the former Muslims that I know was going to get married to a Christian. Now, she was a Christian, and she said, "What? I have vows?" That was one of the big surprises. So that is part of the marriage sacrament. You make promises. But if you're not expecting that or knowing that, and you're coming from a Muslim background, you're like, what? And that can be a scary surprise.
Islam teaches that Muhammad is an example to all mankind. If Muhammad married a 6 years old or 8 years old or 9 years old girl, Muslims will do the same. Some hadith says that she was 8 years old, that Aisha was 8 years old when Muhammad married her. Some hadith says that she was 9 years old. But also there's other hadith that's describing how Muhammad used Aisha sexually when she was 6 years old. That's very clear, that's in the books. But even her own words, I was playing with dolls when the Prophet came and took me. I was playing with dolls. She's just a child, she's a baby. But I go back again to the idea, to the fact that Islam teaches that Muhammad is an example to all mankind. If Muhammad married a 6 years old or 8 years old or 9 years old girl, Muslims will do the same. I was having this conversation with a Muslim man, and I brought up the fact that I'm so troubled with the idea that how young Aisha was and how old was Muhammad, 56 years old. And he told me this straight, if Muhammad is here today, and if I have a baby daughter, and he asked for her, I will give her to him. I couldn't believe it. It's so sad. But this practice is being done in many countries across the Islamic world, especially in Nigeria. Many of these young girls, they get pregnant in a very young age, and they struggle having that baby, and they have to open them with knives. And after that, they become useless for the Muslim men, and they will just dump them in the streets. Many of these young girls in the streets of Nigeria,
What about child marriage? It has been honored since Muhammad. We have this modern fatwa book here from Saudi Arabia in several places saying, yes, child marriage is honored and talking about it. So it is still practiced and still recommended or authorized by the leaders. And how we know for sure is the Quran itself. This is not just hadith. The Quran itself gives rules for divorcing prepubertal girls. So you marry these poor little girls and you can divorce them before they're even really a woman. So hard. And this, you will commonly see this in mothers of the international students. They will, if they open up to you, they will admit it. And a couple of things will happen. One of the international students told me there was a double deal trick done on her mother. Her brother really wanted to marry a young woman, and that family had a young man that was kind of undesirable and they couldn't find a wife for him. So they did a double deal. You can marry this woman, but your sister has to marry our loser son, for lack of a better term. So the loser son marriage went first, and guess what happened? They canceled the other engagement and wouldn't let the brother marry the woman that he wanted. So this was a total trick marriage, and this actually did not work out. There were other marriages after that. So then another arranged or financial benefit marriage for what we would consider underage. One woman I know, when I was introduced to her through her daughter, she said, yeah, when I was 15, my father sold me like a dog to an old man. So, and she was not happy either, and subsequently married somebody else. And then this is another Muslim woman that I knew many years ago, whose mother was married when she was still playing with dolls. She was really a child. And on the wedding night, the husband said to her, you don't need to play with those dolls anymore. I am your husband now. You can be with me. She didn't want to be married. So, I do have experience with these being told by their family. And we know it still is going on. Now we're going to discuss whether someone is really married or not. And there are several examples of this. I like to say in America we check the box, married, unmarried. But here are some things I've come across in my work. One of them is a woman saying to me, my husband is visiting, so I'm busy this weekend. This is a Saudi. And then later she says to me, I'm getting married this summer, will you come? And I'm thinking, what? I thought you were already married. So the story with her, I try to figure out, maybe it means that she had the contract signed but not the party. So these are very difficult to pin down. I have asked my other friends about this, and from the same country, and it's hard to get a firm answer because of these technicalities. And in some cases, maybe they're married with a temporary marriage, but they haven't had the permanent marriage. So it's just something different for us as Americans. Now, there are situations where people are married there but not here, or here but not there. So say someone comes to America, this happens where a young man comes here. He has a secret wife in the other country, and he is married but looking for another wife here. What about this problem? There's a woman who's a second wife overseas, and she comes to America. We only recognize the first marriage. Is she considered married, or can't she marry an American man? And I know a case where this was a consideration. How do we know what to do with this? Do we consider that she's already married with a valid marriage? Here's another example. A woman that I knew got married here to an American who was not a Muslim. She went back to the Middle East, In the Middle East, they don't recognize if you have married a non-Muslim. And she told me, my marriage is not valid over there. What does that mean? Does that mean she can go back and just forget about this marriage and marry again there? And what does the American do? So that person is married here but not there. And for us, when we're married as Americans, it's married both here and there and everywhere, because that's the way our law works for us. Now, what about divorced or not? Sometimes, how can we be sure people are divorced? Seriously, friends, there are Muslim situations where I don't know for sure if they're married or not, or I don't know for sure if they're divorced or not, although theoretically they should be. But remember, in Muslim culture, according to Islam, you can be divorced by word or by text message. If you are told, I divorce you, that is considered to be revocable, that you can remarry again after that. If you're told 3 times, I divorce you, that's the end of it. You cannot remarry again. Well, how can you prove that if there's no paperwork? And maybe the fact that it's a little bit easy to do this is why even in an Islamic seminar I went to, they admitted divorce is higher among Muslims than among general Americans. When a man marries a woman, he should give her some money, like a dowry. So in some cultures, the dowry goes the other way, but in this culture, the mahr goes to the woman. In English, we'd probably call it her nest egg. So she keeps that in case anything happens to her husband or her family. It's her security money. And that would be part of the marriage contract. And if the dad does a good job, he gets her a good mahr. The problem with that is that's money. So this has led to a lot of intermarriage with cousins because you want to keep that money close to home in the family. And marriage of the cousins has resulted in a lot of hereditary disorders that you will see in the Middle East. For example, deafness. Because why? You never know when that man will get rid of his wife. And so you want to keep that money close to home in your family. And in divorce, if she wants to divorce, that mahr money can go to the husband. What about till death do us part? Yes, that actually can become a component of Muslim marriages because perhaps there's a mahr motive for murder as one way to get your money back. And then, of course, there's honor killing. And if women have had boyfriends out of marriage, which is rare, but I have heard of happening, I have heard of people admitting more that someone in their family has done it, or if I read between the lines, I can tell that they have done it. Someone said to me, my husband was always committing adultery, so this guy liked me and I went with him. So things like that you can be killed over. And in fact, even being in public with a man that you're not married to can lead to honor killings. And I do know one young woman who escaped that. One of the big reform situations that women in Iran have been addressing is about the mahr, because they say we have a real problem where the husband will harass the wife so much to get her to leave him, because the money that the man gives to the woman as her mahr or her dowry when they marry, if she leaves him, he gets it back. So he has a financial motive. If he can get the wife to leave him, then he not only has one less wife to support, to keep him from marrying others, but he gets the money. So there's a strong motive for that. And also for divorce, if there's no paper, we don't know they're divorced. What if they just kind of skipped the divorce and they went their separate ways? As Americans, we don't know how to prove that. And how can we then validly feel if we can marry them again or not? What about for longer or shorter? I'm saying that because of temporary marriage in Islam. There are a few kinds of temporary marriage. The one that we most commonly hear about or see is called muta. and it is mostly Shia. The history is that men were off on fighting campaigns, and because Islam is sexually oriented, this wasn't acceptable. So Muhammad came up with the ruling that it was okay for the men to have a temporary wife while they were fighting. With the temporary woman, there were some criteria. You had to have a set time limit, and then there was a certain payment agreed on. So before you would marry her, you'd say, okay, I'm going to be married to you for a month while I'm fighting here in Iraq, and when I leave, I will give you this blanket and so much money and whatever, and you agreed to that. So I don't know what that sounds like to you, but to a lot of people who think about it, it sounds like prostitution, you know. So we Christians don't consider that marriage. No, we consider that prostitution, adultery. We don't think of it as great. The Sunni now say, well, that was a special situation for the time of Muhammad. But the Shia say, no, that's still valid. There's nothing anywhere in the Quran that says it's not valid. So they still honor it, to the extent that some people have reported that they have seen in airports in the Middle East where you can have a temporary marriage for an hour, as little as an hour or two. And we also see that with students and other situations. You can look online and you will find this in temporary marriage sites where the young men praise Allah for His goodness in keeping them chaste by allowing them to have a temporary marriage until they can afford a full-time marriage. So to them, that's a chaste thing to do, to live with the woman and basically defile her, because in their culture, a woman after this is not worth very much. There's a case, I say, you only thought we were married. I know of a case of a Middle Eastern man who came to America, converted a woman and married her. And when he went back to the Middle East, he told her, we need to annul that marriage. So he knew it was temporary, but she didn't. And this was very upsetting to me. I was with this woman, and she was very discouraged over the situation. She gave me a lot of details of what happened on her trip to the Middle East and how she wasn't allowed to see any of the women. So basically this was kept from them, that he had married an American. And I was talking this over with a Muslim student who actually was a Shia. And the way that she defended it at the time was, well, you know, the American kids just live together anyway. American students do that. And I said, well, yeah, but the difference is when we marry in America, we're thinking it's forever. We're not thinking it's just for while this guy is in America and he wants a sex pal. So that is a kind of temporary marriage that's a little different, but when you're coming out of a culture with that mentality, why not? You marry and divorce, it's just for temporary. Oh, here's a good one. Mosque supported muta. Some Iraqis are Shia, you might know that. And I do know a woman who went to the mosque as a refugee and asked for help. And can you guess what the Imam offered her? He said, if you give me temporary marriage, I will help you. So that is part of why she left Islam. She couldn't really believe that. And I find it hard to believe too. That's basically mosque-sponsored prostitution. And I can't tell you how often that happens, but it does happen. And to think that a religious organization would do that for a Christian is really appalling. I mean, if we have scandals in the churches, but we abhor them and we, you know, it doesn't fit with our teaching. Unfortunately, this exactly fits with their teaching. There was a beautiful woman that was one of my students, and while she was with me, she got a phone call from someone who wanted temporary marriage with her. And there's a long and interesting story in that, but that can happen. Let's look at the men's view and the women's view of temporary marriage. Here's the women's view. I need money for some reason, for university, or I'm divorced and I'm out of options, or actually we didn't put on there, maybe she's a child whose parents give her no options, or somebody's raped her or something has happened, and so she's not qualified for full-time marriage. There's some women that they don't think are worthy of full-time marriage. But after they've done the temporary marriage, they become an outcast pretty much, and they're not going to be able to have a regular marriage. So what's the man's view of temporary marriage? God is good to provide a way for us to remain chaste. So that's his view of it. So unfortunately, this still goes on. It goes on not only overseas, but in some places in America and Canada and the West. And there are some disadvantages. Pretty girls get harassed. Another one is, I was told by one of my colleagues that she knew a woman who unfortunately fell in love with the guy she was temporarily married to and had a heartbreak. So she was in a series of temporary marriages. Actually, a Western woman was in a series of temporary marriages to get money, but it kind of backfired on her and broke her heart. Now we want to talk about I've got a secret, marriage. And I have found out that there are a lot of secret marriages in Islam. In the West, you rarely hear of a secret marriage. Maybe in a story, if we put our minds way back to some time, like Romeo and Juliet. But it's not something that we find necessary or beneficial. But in the Islamic culture, because of all the marriages and the variety of marriages, there are secret marriages. And yes, I do know people who have had them. Under what situations? Well, here's the one that is, you are not my only wife. I couldn't tell you before because. And this happened to a woman I know well who married a man she was very in love with, and after they were married, he told her that he had a secret first wife, and that broke her heart. And because of certain circumstances, he could never recognize the second wife as a legal wife. And wow, what a shock after you're married. Another example is the case where you can't tell your people that you're married because maybe it's a second secret wife, and in Islam, men are allowed to keep second secret wives. Sometimes they're called a wife of pleasure and they're not supposed to make children. Other times they could. So Urfi is a secret marriage, a secret additional wife. So you can keep all your family secret from each other, and yes, I do know of occasions where that has happened. Temporary marriage you can keep secret, and rival wives you can keep secret, and these are all okay because the Reliance of the Traveler, for example, says it's okay to lie to your wife to hide other marriages. Reliance of the Traveler is an authoritative Sunni law book. Now here's really one of my favorites because I knew the man involved. This American woman did not know that he was already married. So what kind of guarantee is that for her and her children? No, she has no legal standing before the law. If he had kept faithful to his first marriage, if he had been honest with her from day one that he was married, this American woman would not have gotten into that situation. So did she use bad judgment? Yes. But I consider she is a victim of Islam. Here's another kind of secret marriage that I have run into. And this is because there is serial marriage in Muslim countries. Both men and women can, we would say in English, chalk up multiple marriages. But when you are presenting yourself for a new marriage, it doesn't make you look all that good. So I have been told, for example, don't tell people that I've had 3 other marriages. Or I've been told, yes, I really liked him, but then I found out that through a friend that he had already been married. So You might visualize some Americans doing that, but it's almost frequent and a necessity when you're coming out of a polygamous culture. Now here's one, we might say in English, snafu, or one interesting detail about divorce and remarriage. Because in Islam, you can remarry a woman that you have divorced if she's not irrevocably divorced. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, if you divorced a woman, you could not remarry her. And I do think that was a protection for the woman, because if you couldn't remarry her, you would really have to think seriously. It couldn't be a casual thing, just, well, I met this girl and she would be my fourth, so I have to knock out one of the women. I'll knock her out for a while, and if someone else doesn't work out for me, I'll bring her back in. So the way they make it as a deterrent in Islam, though, is for that woman, she needs to, if she is going to marry him again, she needs to have basically had sex with another man in between. Sort of a temporary marriage. That man is called the legalizer, and that's the only way she can remarry her husband. No one has personally said this to me, but I know of this policy being implemented, and I do have an example for someone who works with me that was worked on the internet, and a woman called in saying, help me, what am I supposed to do? I want to marry my husband again, and they're forcing me to have sex with this strange man. I don't want to have sex with him, but if I don't do it, I can't go back to my husband. So there are real life situations for this that are not pleasant. Okay, here's the one I call "To Hell with You," because although some Muslims you will talk to, or Muslim women, will say, no, women really don't have the right to divorce. They have basically no rights in Islam. Technically, there are some situations, but they have to give the children back to the husband. They have to give the mahr back. It's not easy. And here's one other deterrent to divorce that I call the "To Hell with You." According to this Islamic fatwa, modern fatwa, the wording of the fatwa is, if a woman seeks a divorce due to no harm, she will not enter paradise. Well, this is not the case for a man. He can divorce for whatever reason he wants to. But for the woman, if she just doesn't like the guy, or he's mean, if he's not basically threatening her life, she can't divorce him. So naturally, this could discourage Muslim women from divorce.
Also, another thing I would like to share is adaption. Adaption is forbidden in Islam. Why adaption is forbidden in Islam? And this adaption, because of adaption forbidden, also that's even make it worse for these young girls. They put them to marriage very young age because nobody can adapt them, and young guys that are in the streets homeless because adaption is forbidden. But why adaption is forbidden? Muhammad, he was going to visit his adopted son. And as he went to visit him in his tent, Muhammad's son Zayd was not at the tent. A wind came, part of the tent open, and he saw his daughter-in-law or adopted son's wife dressed not the proper way. He desired her in his heart. He did not say anything. But Allah revealed a verse in the Quran. The verse says this: when Zayd satisfied his sexual desire from her, we given her to you. Compare that with the story of David. David, looking in the top of the roof, see this lady not dressed properly, or just saw the lady showering, whatever it is. He desire her. He bring her, he commits sin. Guess what? God punish him for it. That's the difference between our God and the God of Islam. His God, Muhammad's God, telling him to go and commit adultery, telling them to go and kill in his name, telling them it's okay to lie. But the God of the Bible is not such a thing. He's a different, holy God. He will punish even one sin. When Adam committed one sin, he was separated from God, because our God is a holy God.
In summary, folks, there is just a wide and wild variety of marriages and their consequences in Islam that those of us from the West, meaning Americans, Europeans, Australians, we're not even really thinking are possibilities. And although we are losing a lot of respect for our marriage and we do have divorces, these are things that are really beyond our wildest imagination. And if you are friends with Muslims or a Christian working with them or live in their countries, I think it's good for you to know this. And it can give you some things to pray about and some sympathy for the situations they are in. Thank you for watching.